my real strongest belief that Bitcoin is digital gold and that it's going to ultimately perform much better than gold and gold stock.
You're quite bullish on Bitcoin, and it's interesting to hear from a person your age.
We're not all stupid. Just because we're older, that's stupid. I'm now a full-fledged Bitcoiner. But I don't hate gold, and I actually, within the two camps, some of the Bitcoiners shit on the gold guys, the gold guys shit on the Bitcoiners. I hate it when that happens because we're all fighting the same battle, which is monetary debasement.
Lawrence Leppard, founder of Equity Management Associates EMA, is a seasoned investor specializing in gold and silver mining as well as Bitcoin.
With a $500 million venture capital track record, board roles at top companies, and media appearances on Bloomberg, he's a leading voice in sound money investing.
I will say this, remember, and this is where, okay, even if this system doesn't end, I think this system is highly inflationary because every trick they have up their sleeve leads to inflation, right? So even if I'm wrong about Stein's law, I think the right side of the investment equation to be on is in inflation protection assets that can't be printed. And that's certainly my plan. I mean, when I retire, I will have no income from the business, but I will have a pile of Bitcoin. And if I need to sell 1% of my Bitcoin every year to pay my bills, I'll do it. And being in my 70s and doing that 1% a year, the odds of me running out of money are pretty low.
Hey guys, happy to be back today to Less Noise, More Signal. So today I got a really cool guest. It's Lawrence Leppard, I think. Yeah, that's your name, right? That's how I pronounce it, right?
Yeah.
And you are from the...
It's okay.
Yeah, you're from the United States. And cool to have you with us on the show today. Yeah, you've been taken the world by storm, so to say, the Bitcoin world, I would say, at least with the big... Yeah, with the...
I have
you just recently launched.
Yeah, I haven't launched the book, and we'll see what happens, right?
Yeah, you were just showing it to me. Maybe you can show it again.
Oh, yeah. So it, you see it? Yeah, the big...
Yeah.
It's
quite a cool title that you chose here. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, one of the people who was working with me on the book actually had the idea. It was in the text. I was talking about how they were going to come and do a big print, and they said, that'd be a really good title. Yeah, it kind of would be a little bit of a takeoff on The Big Short, which many people are familiar with. So.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So it's quite a pun, so to say. The big print. Obviously, when it comes to the book itself, we hope that it's going to be a big print, but then also in terms of what's probably going to happen to the world. So I think the full title is The Big Print: What Happened to America and How Sound Money Will Fix It. So it's quite an eloquent title, as I alluded to already. So my question would be, just to kick it off, maybe first off, who are you, for people who might not be familiar with you? And then afterwards, I'd like to talk about...
A lot of people know this, but just very briefly, I've lived in America my whole life, and I've spent my professional career as an investment manager, all kinds of funds, but really actually starting out in the 80s in technology and technology investing, venture capital. And I did that for most of my career, disk drives, and just the whole thing, all the way from the birth of the PC, all the way up to the internet. And the internet was kind of the last area that I really participated in heavily. I found it in 93 and started making investments there. And then in 2003 or 4, I kind of pivoted away from that and started just doing more traditional investing. And then in 2008, the great financial crisis hit, and I kind of got radicalized for sound money. I had always been a sound money person that understood the value of silver and gold, but when I saw what they did in terms of 0% interest rates and money printing in 2008, I really changed my view of what was the right thing to do investment-wise. And so I went full-fledged into being a macro fund manager focused on gold and silver mining stocks. And so I did that from 08, well, even to present. I still have a tail of that fund left, but throughout that process, Bitcoin emerged. As we all know, the white paper came out in 08 or 09, and Bitcoin emerged, and I slowly but surely have kind of drifted away from the gold and silver. I still have a foot in that camp, but my real strongest belief is that Bitcoin is digital gold and silver, or digital gold, and that it's going to ultimately perform much better than gold and gold stocks. So, I'm now a full-fledged Bitcoiner. But I don't hate gold, and I actually, there's there are many, within the two camps, some of the Bitcoiners shit on the gold guys, and the gold guys shit on the Bitcoiners. I hate it when that happens because we're all fighting the same battle, which is monetary debasement and fiat currency, which is really what, in my opinion, has kind of made the world so unpleasant right now. The inflation problems that just kind of persist as a result of the structure we have.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean that's interesting. I think you have this career path. You also describe it, and you go into a little more detail in the book itself, right? You have this section where you talk about it. So for all the folks who are interested in learning more about your actual career path, they certainly have to check it out in the book. I mean, they have to check out the book in total. But yeah, this is also quite interesting. But I mean, one thing that you mentioned, that I would like to hark back to is like you said, you're quite bullish on Bitcoin, and it's interesting to hear from a person your age. I mean, because usually people feel like, yeah, people are all kind of good. Sorry.
We're not all stupid. Just because we're older, that's stupid.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's the thing, I mean, that's usually something that younger people, at least when I talk to them, feel like, it's like, yeah, it's just an old person, obviously given his age, it's just obvious that he doesn't get Bitcoin, but you seem to be different. Just lots of other people, I think, who are different. So I don't know. Why is it that some of the older guys still sometimes
Couple things. I mean,
wrap their hand around?
yeah, people get set in their ways. I mean, if you've done something a certain way forever and it works for you, and then something comes along and changes that, it's hard to necessarily make change. I think I might be a little bit of a unique case because think about it. I was investing in technology, and I saw the internet emerge, and I saw, I've been very on top of all the technical changes that have taken place over the past 30 years. And so when this one came along, it was just like, oh yeah, here's the next thing. It was like cell phones or whatever it might be. The internet, et cetera. So that helps, right? That I had a technology investing background, and really this just is a new invention, a new technology that has changed the nature of the monetary system. And so, I'm kind of I was in a unique position of understanding the problems of unsound money, and then also understanding how technology is evolving. And then when the two came together and intersected at the Bitcoin space, it's like, oh, I get it. But, you're right. A lot of people my age, it's very hard. And a lot of people my age have done extremely well. I mean, the people in the Fiat game, a lot of them are very, very rich and, played the game perfectly. And their view is they're geniuses. There can't possibly be anything that's better than them or that would upset their worldview, And as I think, and a lot of us like to say, Bitcoin's a little bit of an ego test. Are you willing to question your assumptions and consider the possibility that something has changed? And that really is the difference, right? Something has changed. This technology, this thing got invented, and it changes things. And so you have to accept that. But some people haven't, obviously, in my age, particularly, tends to have that problem. I mean, young people, you guys just come along, you're like, oh yeah, I get it. So.
Well, I mean, yeah, usually they do, but there's even like younger people as well as like older people who are sort of, as you said, gold bugs. They're libertarian, and sometimes if I talk to some of them, they're still like, okay, I studied Bitcoin, I looked at it, but I still don't get it, because there's something feels off, And my question to you would be like, what is it that made it click for you? Why? Like, because obviously, I think to really, really understand Bitcoin, it's so vast, it's so complex, and I think none of us really does have like a full-fledged understanding of what it really is. So what is it that made it click for you?
And I think this is how it is with everybody too. It comes in pieces, right? I mean, you're intrigued by it. And like I bought some at 400, but I really know what I was buying. I thought, well, I understood the libertarian argument. I understood that they can't print it argument, et cetera. But I was very concerned about the technology. I didn't know, is this really going to work? There were multiple experiments pre-Bitcoin that failed. They didn't really solve the double spend problem. And so, and then I started going to seminars, I started meeting people, and I learned what the difficulty adjustment was, and I learned what the halvings were about. And, as you get deeper down into it, as you all know, you come to understand that, oh my goodness, this thing really is working, and it really is brilliantly engineered. And of course, time is another proof factor, right? I mean, in 2013, you're thinking this is an experiment. I mean, I talked to core developers in 2013 who I said, what do you think of this thing? And they said, shit, I worry that it could blow up. These are core developers, right? So, I'm thinking, well, if they're the guys working on the core and they're worried it could blow up, maybe I should be worried it could blow up. So, but I mean, you go through the side, you have the forks, and then you see the bad stuff die off, and then you have the block size wars, and you get SegWit, and you see these things go by, and you just get more and more proof points. I mean, of course, the most recent one that I think was huge was, and a lot of my friends wouldn't touch it because they said, well, the government's just going to kill it. They don't want to have an alternative source of money. They're going to kill it. Well, then in January of last year, they approved ETFs, right? And I was kind of like, well, how do you feel about that now? The government's going to kill it, and yet they approve these ETFs? I don't think so. So, I think with me anyway, and I don't know if this is true with other people, but with me anyway, it's been a gradual orange pilling from, I think this is cool and interesting and might work, to, oh my God, this is going to be the base layer of money. I feel like a lot of people go that path. I mean, everyone starts with a little bit of skepticism, as you should, right? But over time, as you learn and study it more, I think the logical thing that happens is you get to where I am, which is your crazy orange.
Yeah, exactly. I think it was the same with me and with some of the people that I know. Initially you take this leap of faith, as it is with so many other things. It's just a leap of faith that you take, and then because like as time passes, as you said, you learn more about it, and at some point you're like, okay, everything starts to fall in place, and it starts clicking, and that's the thing. As you said, as you also learn about stuff, and then you grow in confidence. So time is definitely on Bitcoin side.
Yeah, to say so. And that process is going to take place with everybody throughout the entire world. But everyone's at different stages of their Bitcoin journey. And it starts off just with a curiosity and a willingness to listen and to start to learn. And honestly, that's really why I wrote the book. I feel like it's a very important change. I feel like it's going to have a big impact on the financial future. I look at the average citizen in the world, and as you know, they're hurting. The inflation and the money printer have really made their lives difficult. And they might be frustrated, and they don't know how to fight back. They don't have any way of protecting themselves from the inflation, although they kind of do with gold. And they don't really know how to fight back. And it's like, so the first half of the book is defined as the problem, and the second half of the book is defined as the solution. And, if you read the problem section, you could actually get kind of depressed. Like, seriously, like, I put it all in there, right? All the central, I mean, it's like, man, is this system broken and rigged? This really is bad. But the good news is there's a solution, a really great solution, and that's the second half of the book, talking about Bitcoin.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I want to talk about the problem real quick, and then also about the solution. But maybe one thing that just came to mind, because you were mentioning it, and we were talking about these people who sort of struggle to understand Bitcoin. I'm always wondering also, why is it with people like Jamie Dimon and all these people from high up the rank, who really don't seem to be understanding it. And there I have a feeling they're almost poised to not understand it. I think, I don't know, of this quote, like Upton Sinclair it was, who said it's difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on him not understanding it. And I think that's pretty much right with a lot of people, right?
Right, that's true with a lot of people, and don't kid yourself. He's a smart man. I think he understands it perfectly well, and I think he understands what it represents in terms of being a threat to the system that he has become a billionaire in. And so he's not going to support something that threatens that system. And that goes, there are many people who fall into that camp. I mean, another good one I think is Warren Buffett. He called her rat poison squared. In my book, I actually say, yeah, it's rat poison squared, and you're the rat. Warren. I mean, it's just, yes, there are many, many people who, I mean, in order to seek out solutions and to seek something different, in my view, you need to be feeling pain. I mean, when you're dumb, fat, and happy, life is good. And for people who live, particularly in the financial world, the TradFi people, PE people, Wall Street people, whatever, for many of them, life has been very good. They've gotten very, very rich at this existing system. So they're not feeling any pain. And so they see something that comes along, and, they say, why do I need that? I'm doing great. And then they also think to themselves, gosh, now that I understand a little bit more, this kind of threatens what I'm doing. Oh, okay. I don't like it. No, I think it's as simple as that.
This show is brought to you by New Hedge. In a market driven by complexity, insight is everything. NewHedge is a dedicated Bitcoin analytics and intelligence platform delivering cutting-edge analysis, on-chain metrics, and real-time market data. With 200 plus proprietary indicators, live derivatives data, and adoption metrics, NewHedge provides the depth and precision that serious market participants demand. Backed by some of Bitcoin's most prolific investors, NewHedge connects traditional finance with Bitcoin's evolving landscape. Gain your data edge today. Sign up for free now at newhedge.io and get 50% off your advanced subscription with the code SIGNAL. Yeah, it's really this systemic pressure, I was saying. As you said, like a lot of people have been profiting handsomely off of this, because like I used to work as a financial journalist as well here in Switzerland, and I did interviews with people high up the rank here with bankers, and I was always it had me perplexed and intrigued, that like when I talked to these people, like in front of the camera, they were so skeptical about everything, in terms of like, Bitcoin and other gold and like libertarian thinking. But then when you had them off the record, everyone was basically saying, well, I hold it myself, I know I'm part of a system. So this is always something that I was like, okay, something here it's about the system,
Isn't that interesting? That's surprising. It's not surprising, but that's very interesting.
Yeah, because that then sort of got me thinking as well, and I was like, oh, maybe I'm on the right track, by believing these things, because all these people would do so as well if they just could, but like for whatever reason, because of the system, they weren't allowed, so to say, to speak their mind freely, and that was just really interesting to see. Yeah. But I mean, and I wanna ask you the question, So your title is "What Happened to America and How Sound Money will Fix It." So my question would be, to start off, like, what actually happened? Can you sort of summarize what today's core problem is?
Yeah, and this is part of what drove me to write the book. I'm 67 years old, so I've seen America. I grew up in the 60s. I was very young in the 60s, but in the 70s and 80s and so forth, and I've seen what America used to be like, and it's not that way anymore. And it's, the middle class has been eviscerated, and, it's changed, and I don't like it. I mean, I want the America of my youth back. And I think the reason that that's occurred, and the book lays this out pretty clearly, is just the inflation that we've suffered. And the Keynesians have tried to convince the world that inflation is just something we will always have to live with. And, that's the Keynesian mantra, and it's wrong. And it happened, we've had inflation in America since the founding of the country, but there's a great chart in the book that shows how for the first, until 1971, all the inflations were generally around wars, and they generally mean reverted. After 71, the curve becomes a hockey stick. And, we've just had persistent inflation, and it's gotten worse, and it's very bad right now. And I think it's going to continue to be bad. And that's inflation really hurts the working man. Inflation hurts the average citizen. I mean, rich people know how to play the inflation game. They can borrow cheaply, they can hold assets, they can use financial engineering to, to make themselves richer. But the guy who works for a salary, all he knows is his salary is not going up, and the cost of everything he buys is going up. And so he gets screwed. And that's wrong. And, there's a chart that shows the wealth inequality, and the top 1% has 92% of the wealth, and the bottom 50%, their wealth hasn't gone up at all over the past 30 years. So that's why I think America's broken. And that's why, you're not here, but just from a political point of view, we've got some very unhappy people, and a lot of people screaming at each other about, trying to, the blue side's blaming the red side side's blaming the blue side. And I was looking at all that, and I was like, you guys, you're missing the point. It's not a blue-red thing. This is an inflation thing that's causing America. I mean, people here are hurting. I think probably all over the world, people are hurting, especially middle income or lower people, because of the inflation. And so, but people are missing the underlying cause. And a lot of the politicians try to deflect, a couple of politicians were saying, well, it's the greedy corporations that are causing it. No, it's not. I mean, inflation is being caused by the Federal Reserve printing money, full stop. So, and I just wanted to lay that out so that maybe we could get a political movement going in America where people would read it, understand it, and say, you know what, we got to end the Federal Reserve. And that's really, you don't see anybody talking about that in America except for Ron Paul. And so, but that's really what we have to do. I mean, if we want to solve the inflation problem, we've got to go back to a sound money standard and the Federal Reserve. That's the solution.
Yeah.
I wanted to say that, and my dream, and it really is probably just a dream. I'm not sure it'll happen, but my dream is that we get a political movement going and we move in that direction. I think that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I want to talk about this as well, but maybe just one thought that came to mind. It's like, because you mentioned inflation being like especially bad for lower income people and also sort of for the middle class. I mean, I think that's what's so hideous about this dynamic, because it really hollows out the middle class, in the end. And then you can see it in the United States, probably you can see it all throughout Europe. We in Switzerland, where I'm from, where I'm currently at, I mean, we're comparatively well off still, but I think it's also being hollowed out. And I want to say this because I just came back from South Africa, Cape Town. I lived there for a couple of weeks, and it's an amazing place. If you're well off, if you're rich, it's sort of this golden cage that you're living in. But most people don't really still are really afraid of living there their entire life, because they're saying there's basically no middle class. It's just poor people and then the rich one. And so you have nothing in between, which is just like, it makes it so dangerous for people to live there. And I think that's sort of, maybe it's a little over exaggerated, but I think that's the track we're on. If you hollow out the middle class through something like inflation, and you're going to be bad up.
Yeah, you have a violent and unpleasant society where people are they're struggling to stay alive, and that leads to a lot of bad behavior. Sadly, yeah, it's not a good thing, but it's going to get fixed. I mean, let's talk about the optimism part of the book. I mean, the technology and decentralization that's taking place is going to be a counterforce and a counter trend to what is up until now gone the wrong way.
Mm-hmm. And I want to ask you this question because you said, end the Fed, Ron Paul. Everybody who's probably libertarian is familiar with him. But then, if you, as you said it yourself, nobody is talking about this. So if you have like a normal person, so to say, from the regular street, mention that you want to end the Fed, they're like, oh, this is never going to happen because the world would go to shit, and it's like, a system can't work without it. So what would be your counter response to that?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's a lie that the system can't work without it, because from 1789 to 1913, the country did extraordinarily well. So, and there was no Federal Reserve. So the system can work without it. We know that. We've seen that. The history is back quite a ways. It's also a lie that the Fed makes things better. And the book really goes into detail on how and why that's the case. And you need to kind of understand it's not a simple soundbite answer for why ending the Fed is the right thing to do, but basically it's the Federal Reserve that enacts the Keynesian policies that print the money that cause the inflation, and therefore, if you want to solve the inflation problem, you cut it off at the root. Now there are other measures, there are other actions that could be taken short of ending the Fed that would help. I mean, in particular, we could also decide to back the dollar by either using gold or Bitcoin. I mean, the problem got a lot worse after 71. It really did. When we went off the gold standard, that was a big deal. And, and in theory, we could go back to it. And even there's some rumblings that, the U.S. might revalue its gold right now. Our Treasury Secretary Besant has hinted at that. So, it's not sadly, you can't give a soundbite argument for why you should end the Fed, but if you take any time and read the history carefully, you can, and you're smart, can't help but come to the conclusion that that's the solution. And you're right. I mean, it's right now, it's only libertarians, a few people even know who Ron Paul is, but you know what? I mean, 10 or 20 years ago, you should see how like zero people knew who he was. And now, we've got all these Bitcoiners. I mean, one of the things that was very satisfying to me was see all these young Bitcoiners start coming up to me and quoting von Mises. And that's because they read Safe's book. And, so I'm an older guy. I've been a sound money guy since before Bitcoin was invented. What I'm really encouraged by is your generation, the younger generation, reading all the classic Austrian economics texts, and then also reading Safe's book, and coming to the same conclusion I came to, which is that sound money is the key. And, so now we've got a whole group of reinforcements. So, and I mean, here's another data point that I think is very significant. I mean, I was in Nashville last summer at the Bitcoin conference, we had two major U.S. presidential candidates talking about the value of sound money in Bitcoin. I mean, President Trump gave a speech about it, and Robert Kennedy gave a speech about it. And I mean, this is unprecedented. I mean, this wasn't even a topic of discussion for the last 20 years. So, that's, to me, I mean, look, that's not a groundswell movement. That's not everybody realizing it's important, but it's a start. And, you've got a Senator Loomis who's pushing for a strategic Bitcoin reserve. You've got a Thomas Massey who's pushing for revaluing gold. There will be more, right? I mean, we will, if this book works and a lot of people read it and the word spreads, we will develop over the next 10 or 15 years a political consensus to, go back to some kind of sound money. And that's why I wrote the book. I mean, that's what I hope happens.
Yeah, sort of a plan flip for the movement, because like in the end, yeah, it really feels like with Bitcoin, obviously something changed. It is sort of sparking the movement that you're speaking of, and then just recently, because as you brought it up, with Trump and these people now being elected, I feel like also among Bitcoiners, even it feels like now is the time to pull it off. And pieces are sort of coming together. And obviously Trump, he's a double-edged sword. You never know. He's still a politician. But I feel like, I don't know if you have the same feeling, but a lot of people feel like now is the time that something like change could really be happen. With all these moving parts coming together.
He's a disruptor, and there could be a lot of change. I mean, it's unclear how far we can get. I mean, we got a long way to go, and, politics is politics, and you can't do everything instantly. But, I think we could be very pleasantly surprised at how much progress we make with this administration. I mean, they're talking about a strategic crypto reserve. I wish they called it a Bitcoin reserve, because I don't believe in crypto. But we're seeing a lot of things that, I mean, honestly, if I'd known about this 2 years ago, I'd have said that could never happen, but it's happening. So I'm quite optimistic. Will we get all the way to the goal line in this administration? I don't know. I mean, we got a long way to go, but we're gonna move the ball down the field. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. And it's certainly a time to be alive, which is amazing. Yeah. But you mentioned Stein's law in your book as well. I found this really interesting. If something cannot go on forever, it will end. And so I think you're also alluding, or at least that's how I read it. You're alluding to the current system. And so my question would be, is this really true for a fiat system? Because obviously, I mean, bluntly said, we had so many gold bugs, before the Bitcoiners, they kept on calling for the demise of the fiat system. And so far it hasn't been imminent, and now it's the Bitcoiners again. So my question really is, is it going to end itself, or will we deal the final blow to it? Or
it's a great question. None of us know the answer for sure. And they've kicked the can much longer than I thought they could. And I have a lot of people who say to me, well, Larry, they'll kick the can for another 50 years. And my reply to that is, I don't think so. And the reason I don't think so is that the math is really bearing down on them. And the math and history would suggest that when the debt to GDP ratios, and there's a chart in there from one of the managers, I can't remember. There's a chart in there it'll come to me, that shows how when you get to kind of 130% debt to GDP, you have a currency crisis. And that's kind of where we are right now. And it's math, right? I mean, what I try and point out, and the reason I wrote the book again, is that if you grow the debt at 8% and you grow GDP at 4%, which is kind of what we've been doing for a long, long time, eventually the gap between the two becomes unserviceable. The debt, because the interest on the debt and the principal on the debt is repaid by the GDP. And, the productive capacity of the economy is what pays off the debt. And in the early days, using debt to grow is fun because, it doesn't cost that much and helps you to, juice the growth. But eventually it gets to be a problem. It's like, drinking. I mean, eventually you're knocked down drunk and you gotta sober up. And so, that's kind of the stage where we're at. Now, can we keep going for a while and drink some more? Maybe. I mean, it's possible, but, my looking at the math, and my looking at the amount we're printing, and my looking at, U.S. federal interest expense, it tells me we're in the kind of close to the end game of this thing where something's going to happen. I mean, they're going to have to restructure in some way, or that debt is going to collapse, or we're going to have very high inflation to bring the GDP back up to a level where the debt is serviceable. I mean, we had a similar debt to GDP ratio after World War II, and through yield curve control And, the fact that we had good demographics and the fact that, we put America on wheels and Detroit, built a lot of cars, we kind of outgrew the debt that the war had created. But, unless AI and productivity increases really, really come on fast, our demographics are not nearly as good right now. We've got more old people than young people in the United States. It's going to be challenging to just kind of grow out of this pit. But, I suppose it's possible. I mean, one thing I've learned in doing financial management for all these years is just never say never. You just don't know what's going to happen. But
Yeah.
if I look at the patterns, I feel like it's a pretty high probability that this is going to become a crisis in the next 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, as you said, the math is really out there and it's undisputable. But then at the same time, as you say, like the world and the system and everything is still so humbling. In the end, you never know what's going to
So,
happen. And
no,
I mean,
yeah, well, and they'll pull, they might have new tricks up their sleeve. I mean,
the Fed has had has never been out of option. And they always have another trick up their sleeve. That's for sure. Yeah.
I might fail. I thought that might be it, but nope, they figured that one out. I mean, every little, but I will say this, remember, and this is where, okay, even if this system doesn't end, I think this system is highly inflationary because every trick they have up their sleeve leads to inflation, right? And therefore, okay, fine, we have the same system. It keeps going for another 20 years, but we're going to have inflation. And thus, that's why Bitcoin is such a great alternative because it protects you from that inflation. So even if I'm wrong about Stein's law, I think the right side of the investment equation to be on is in inflation protection assets that can't be printed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, I think that's also why Bitcoin resonates with so many young people because, like, before Bitcoin, obviously that's the feeling I had. I mean, I'm also a little older than Bitcoin itself, and I sort of studied the fiat system before Bitcoin, and then it's obviously like, yeah, you were sort of okay. How can I really protect myself? Because even as you say, if the system never really collapses, there's going to be like a release wealth, and it's the currency. It's going to be inflated away. So you're going to get poorer, and so with Bitcoin, obviously, you have this new hope. So my question would be, what was life really before Bitcoin? I mean, you were a lot older than me, and you started this system, and it was so Bitcoin. And
the 70s, 80s, and 90s, it was fine because it was, there was inflation in the 70s. 80s and 90s were actually a pretty good time. I mean, inflation was tamer and there was some great technological innovations. I mean, the PC and all the technical stuff that came in really made life a lot better for many people. And then when China came online, and started producing things cheaply, that had benefits as well. But, throughout all of this, we knew there was a core rot in the financial system. And for me, pre-Bitcoin, I mean, I was experiencing a lot of, I don't know, just frustration because gold really wasn't working. I mean, I was using gold as a means of protecting myself, and it did. I mean, it went up 8% a year, which is, a little bit higher than inflation, but it didn't really help me get ahead. And they figured out, the governments had figured out how to manipulate the gold price, and there's a lot of paper gold in the world and so forth. So, when Bitcoin came along, what got me so excited was it's like, okay, we got reinforcements. We got all these young people, we got a better tool. Bitcoin's a much better tool than gold because it's easier to transfer, easier to verify. It can't be, hypothecated as easily. Now there is a risk of paper Bitcoin, but I rate that risk as modest to low. Whereas in the case of gold, they've had 50 years to manipulate the price of gold, and they've done a great job of doing that. I mean, the gold price using the monetary aggregates in the U.S. Gold holdings, if we still have them. If you divide it out, the gold price should be $89,000 an ounce, to mount the two. And right now it's, 3,000, 2,900. So.
And yeah, it's a great point. And why would you say is Bitcoin more immune to this, like to this sort of corruption?
You got triple entry accounting. So first of all, you can see the ledger, you can verify the reserves. I mean, Fort Knox hasn't been audited since 1953, right? So the U.S. says we have 261 million ounces. Do we? I don't know. I mean, maybe they sold some, during the London gold pool days. I just don't know. And Bitcoin doesn't have that issue. You can see where all the coins are on chain. It's also more volatile, which is a problem from an investor point of view, but it's a good thing from a manipulation point of view. That if you're trying to use paper Bitcoin to short Bitcoin and Bitcoin goes up 5x, you've got a big hole in your balance sheet. Now, the central banks have printers and they can use the printer to fill that hole, but the point is, it's a tougher beast for, a Cayman Islands hedge fund to manipulate, which is what they've done with gold. So, and also it's newer. And so they haven't had as much time to figure out, all the workarounds for the manipulation. Whereas in the case of gold, it's been around forever. And so they started manipulating it, back in the 60s. And so they've had plenty of time.
Yeah, I see. And how do you assess the developments, that some people are eyeing critically as well, that like Bitcoin is going to get concentrated in a few hands, like MicroStrategy, for example, but then also with all these reserve discussions, with governments holding Bitcoin and pulling it out of the hands of the people. Any danger you see there as well?
I really don't, because you'll have layer 2 on top of it, and for using for transactions, and it's going to get fully distributed. I mean, what Bitcoin ought to become is it's the global savings tool. And, if you want to own some global savings, you buy some Bitcoin. And, yes, it'll get concentrated, but also the concentration will lead to people selling it. I mean, when Bitcoin's $1 million a coin, you'll have some early holders who will sell their coins into the marketplace and provide supply. When it's 10 million, you'll have more of that. And so, it flexes to whatever size it needs to be, via the price. So the fact that there are only 21 million coins isn't really the issue. The issue is, what's the total market value of it? What's the value of a Satoshi? So it will get, just like any other form of money, it will get fully distributed, very balanced out, based on the marketplace and just based on honest buying and selling. The thing that's so fabulous and unique about it is that it's fair. It's fairly distributed. I mean, yes, there's concentration. I mean, MicroStrategy wants to put up a lot of money and buy the Bitcoin today. Fine, let them do it. But they've done it. Anyone else could have done that. The marketplace is open. There's nobody saying you can't buy Bitcoin. And there's nobody who can print Bitcoin. The only way to get it is to either buy it from somebody else by providing, capital or services for it, or by mining it as a Bitcoin miner and earning the block reward. And of course, that's proof of work, and that costs money in terms of the energy to mine it. So, and it's fair. I mean, everybody plays by the same rules. I think that's the most important thing. The book emphasizes that. I mean, the current system as we've now got it, everyone's not playing by the same rules. It's an unfair system. The insiders have an advantage over the working man, big time. And it's just incredibly unfair. And that's why everyone's hurting so bad. That's why everyone's so angry. And so here along comes this system. And we now have a system where the rules are the same for everyone. And that's really, really powerful, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's for sure. I mean, that's an interesting point as well. I mean, I want to have this one question, because you already alluded to it by saying that we no longer need the Fed, but maybe you can drop a few points there, like a few more points, in terms of that. Like, what could like a true monetary reform look like in practice? And I think you go into more detail in the book.
Well, I talk about that in the book. I mean, it's complicated. We don't know how it's going to happen. But in theory, what really needs to happen is the debt needs to be devalued. We've got too much debt that's really not money good. We've got too many commitments that can't be fulfilled at today's price level. And so we need to write this down and think it's like a home. If you think of it in terms of a household, it's like a household that's got tons and tons of credit card debt. They'll never pay it off. They've got to restructure it and agree to pay 30 cents on the dollar, or they've got to file bankruptcy and start over again. And since filing bankruptcy is kind of tough for a country, I think the more realistic thing they've got to do is they'll do a currency reset. And so, what I think should happen, and it'll be hard, it'll be very hard, very painful, is, the federal government should at some point in time say, okay, we're going to devalue the dollar. We're going to have a new dollar. The new dollar is going to be backed by Bitcoin, and the Bitcoin price is going to be substantially higher. And so those of you with old dollars, you're not going to have as much purchasing power, and those of you with Bitcoin and the new dollar, you're going to have more purchasing power, and that's going to be very inflationary and very painful for a lot of people. The one time when it happens, okay, so one time everyone's going to go, wow, this is horrible, but on a go-forward basis, you will then have sound money that can't be printed. That's the important thing to understand. I mean, other countries, this has happened many times in the world, these currency resets in smaller countries, not with the reserve currency. But, other countries have gone through this. And here's the good news. When you go through this, if you then return to sound money, everything reorganizes and works pretty well. In fact, it works great. But, the process itself is a painful one-time event. And I believe that's something we have to cross through. Uh, and, it could happen via hyperinflation, but that's extremely messy and ugly. And there are a lot of problems with that. Hyperinflations in general have not been good things. And particularly at a reserve currency level, it could be a tragic thing. And so I think the smarter way to approach it would be to, as a government, say, we've got a debt problem. We need to revalue the debt relative to an underlying sound source of money, and let's do it. And it's going to hurt, but let's do it once. And on a go-forward basis, we'll have a fair system. That's my belief in the right approach to solving the problem. But that takes a lot of political courage. And whether that could happen, I don't know. I mean, I get the chance that the politicians do the wrong thing and they just keep driving us down this road, and we have incredibly high inflation. Maybe when we have high, we'll get enough politicians who will rise up and say, hey, we can't take this anymore. We got to reset the debt. But, worst case, we go to hyperinflation. We have hyper Bitcoinization and the dollar's worthless. And then we're in the same place, but it was a painful ride to get there, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, just thinking out loud about this, I mean, one way I think it could happen is just because Bitcoin is sort of this mind virus, and it spreads like crazy, and everyone at some point is going to hold some Bitcoin, as Satoshi said, you better hold some in case it catches on.
Yes.
And maybe at some point, so many people are gonna hold some Bitcoin that you can actually sort of do this revalue, devaluing the dollar and then revalue it by tethering it to Bitcoin, because like so many people will also be sort of will be hedged sort of because they're already holding some of the Bitcoin, and then
Certainly
it
so.
might not be as hard.
Yeah, certainly so. And that's kind of what I hope for, actually, that we move towards it, this greater adoption, and that it just, it could happen slowly and organically, and that might be the least painful way for it to happen. And I mean, I would like to see us get there. I'd prefer that we get there sooner rather than later, but in turn, I don't want to have the world turn to shit because, of some financial catastrophe. So yeah, I mean, another ideal way to get there would be to slowly but steadily go there. And again, the book is trying to help that, right? I mean, if we get a lot of people to be on a Bitcoin standard, well, then a Bitcoin standard will kind of emerge organically, and that could be good, right? So
Yes. No, for sure. I mean, one last question that I would like to ask you is really because, again, you are sort of from an older generation, and I have some friends and like my father and my grandfather, who might be listening to this. And then there's like, okay, older people usually ask, well, Bitcoin, why should I hold it? I mean, I have to prepare for retirement. Bitcoin is way too volatile, so I can't hold any of this. So what is your response there? I mean,
yeah,
you definitely are holding Bitcoin, right?
well, look, yeah, it's because it's the soundest money ever, and it's destined to become the base layer of money, and it's going to appreciate better than any other form of money. But those are the good things. The bad thing is that in this adoption process, it is very volatile. And so I recommend to my clients that they weight it appropriately for that volatility. I mean, if you're 80 years old, you put all your money in Bitcoin, it draws down 50%, you're going to be really unhappy, right? On the other hand, if you're 80 years old, you have 10% of your money in Bitcoin, it draws down 50%. You're like, maybe I'll buy some more. I'll take advantage of the price dip. So, it's appropriate. You got to size it appropriately for your risk profile. A lot of my clients who, I recommend they also be in gold, right? Because gold has never had 80, 90% drawdowns. I mean, the biggest one is like 20 or almost 30% right after the 1980, burst in price. But, gold is up 2/3 of the years it's been around. And then the other 1/3, when it's down, it's typically only down single digits. So, it's a less volatile form of sound money. But the other thing to address your question is, a lot of older people say, well, yeah, but it doesn't pay a dividend. There's no income stream from it. It's not like real estate. And my answer to that is, well, okay, fine, but you should look at it like an asset that's appreciating, and you should think in terms of kind of like an annuity where, you could, if you get enough of it, you could easily say, I'm going to just sell 3% of it every year. And as long as the remainder goes up more than 3%, then you're not really getting any poorer, and so, and that's certainly my plan. I mean, when I retire, I will have no income from my business, but I will have a pile of Bitcoin. And, if I need to sell 1% of my Bitcoin every year to pay my bills, I'll do it. Being in my 70s and doing that 1% a year, the odds of me running out of money are pretty low.
Yeah, for sure. And do you hold any bonds at all? I mean, that's
No,
people.
no, bonds are horrible. That's just I think bonds are going to get absolutely killed. I mean, one can make an argument for holding certain stocks depending on what they are, but I just can't. I can't see any reason. I mean, I should correction. I hold some very short-term T-bills. I keep my cash in T-bills that yield 4%. But that's that's got no duration risk. I mean, I could turn those into cash in 30 days. So, but yeah. So
Yeah, it's totally. So your portfolio would basically be like short term T-bills, gold and Bitcoin. That's probably it,
pretty much. I mean, I have a couple of houses, that
Yeah, yeah, and real estate. That's
that I
probably.
pay for, but I don't really view those as investments. I mean, they're just kind of, but they, fortunately you can't print them, so they're going to, and whatever the new currency is, they'll be more valuable. I mean, we really are kind of going to. I mean, my view is we really are kind of going to go through a currency reset. You know, whether it's soft or hard or fast or slow. I mean, all that. Who knows? I mean, it's very hard to predict in financial markets what's going to happen, but it's pretty clear to me that's where we're going. Well, the book shows this. There's a good chart in there that talks about it. Shows the valuation of Bitcoin and gold in bond terms. I mean, bonds used to be the base layer of the financial system. The U.S. Treasury bond used to be the safest thing you could own, period. And since 2020, Bitcoin is up 2,000% compared to the U.S. Treasury bond, and gold's up 200% compared to the U.S. Treasury bond. I mean, what's up with that? I mean, what that tells me is that we are in a sovereign debt crisis. And people just haven't recognized it yet, and that's the reason for the book. That's
Yeah. No, it's amazing. Yeah. So thanks for filling us in. And then obviously, as said, we're going to link to the book. Yeah. The more education there is, the better. Yeah, exactly. The big praise. We're going to link to it. So to get. Yes, exactly.
they're selling books.
No, nice. Yeah. Thanks, Larry, for coming on. And my last question is a question that we usually ask to every guest. Is there any other high signal person that you would recommend that we need to talk to and bring onto the show?
Well, gosh, there's so many of them. I mean, where do I start, right? I mean, obviously, Saifedean, Lynn, Jeff Booth, Preston Pish. I mean, Jack Mallers. There's a long list of Bitcoiners, I think, that can really, explain and talk about all these issues. Luke Roman. I mean, these are all BS who were featured in the book because of the quality of their analysis. And the book really, it's not as if I've come up with a bunch of original ideas. I've organized kind of the best of Bitcoin, in a manner and in a format that I think is interesting to the average person. I mean, my experience was that I would give people the Bitcoin Standard or Lynn's book, Broken Money, both of which are brilliant books, fabulous, brilliant books that changed the world. But the average person would bog down and say, this is too technical. I don't care about monetary policy that much. I can't really read this. And that's why I wrote my book. You've read it, so you can tell me how you felt about it. But I tried to write it as a story and in a style and simply enough that, anyone can read it. You don't have to know what the Federal Reserve is. You don't have to know what money is. You don't have to know, anything about Austrian economics. You can read this and go, oh, wow, I get it. I kind of see what they're talking about here. I tried to make it easy so that, everyone understand it. I don't know. What did you think? Was I able to do that?
Yeah, certainly. I would say it's a big book, big print, but an easy read. I mean, you have these short chapters, which makes it also quite enjoyable to read. And as you say, it's sort of like, it's a storytelling. As I said, with the message that you have about your own personal career and
I
life.
put that in there. People listen to stories, right? People don't
Exactly.
textbooks. They want to hear.
Who can relate?
They can relate, right? And so I told a story, and I put all my personal stuff in there, which some people are like, I didn't need that, but whatever. I mean, I just did it because I thought, others said, well, that's great. And I think it, the objective again was to keep people engaged.
Yeah, exactly.
You're reading, you're kind of like, wow, this is interesting. Maybe this guy may be crazy, but I should read this. So.
Yeah, exactly. No, with everything, it's always a trade-off, but I think you managed to do this well. And as I said, I'm definitely going to link to it. So thank you, Larry, for taking the time to fill us in. And
come back and join you in the future as your podcast grows.
Sure, cool. Thank you, man. Have a good one.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.